Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this office hour. This is office hour number 15. So we've been doing this for quite some time with great success. Thank you all for your support. And today's topic is going to be ITBM Agile, best practice overview of Agile and Agile reporting in ITBM. We have our senior subject matter experts, Colin, as well as Tom Gray here from ServiceNow. The goal is for the first 30 minutes, pretty much, if they want to go over, they can. The whole goal is to make sure that they level set us in the topics and conversation around what does it mean from a ServiceNow perspective in those areas. And then the remaining half of the time is open to you as customers to ask any questions of each other as well as the subject matter experts. So one thing I will always say too is if we find that this office hour was not enough time to cover this topic, we are more than happy and willing to add in an additional office hour, kind of do like a little mini series. So don't be afraid to ask for that maybe towards the end of it. If not, but survey that we always provide as well. So I just want to make sure you guys all know that. With that said, I'm going to cut up now and then hand the baton over to Colin and Tom.
Thank you, Charles. And hey, everybody, this is Tom Gray. Happy Monday. So let's see. Share. I'm going to do a little slideware, but then I'm going to do a little software too. So we'll get a little of both here. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yep, I can.
Sound like everyone was hearing me as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to start here with, and we called this Scrum program starting in Orlando, but I want to give a little background to it too, in terms of especially as folks are on their Agile journeys, because we often start with just a team or two. We're launching Scrum teams. We're getting people like Scrum Masters and product owners minted. We're figuring out who the engineers and the QA folks and even UX folks, all that, need to be on our teams. And that's a journey in and of itself. And by no means do I want to, underestimate the importance of that part of the journey. It's just typically that's the first part of our journey. Then as we kind of start expanding that part of our journey, as our journey kind of evolves beyond that, what we find is that, the work that any one particular Scrum team can do or that can deliver is often bigger than that one team's ability to deliver. Or it'll just take far too long if we're having one team deliver it. So we start looking at ways to have multiple Agile teams working together on either trying to deliver a specific outcome, and maybe that can be in a variety of different containers, or we're just having multiple teams working together on an ongoing basis because they're continuously collaborating and delivering things. But kind of regardless of whether that situation is, what we find is that we need to start connecting our teams together in meaningful ways, especially so that we can create realistic plans. And that's really where we started with Scrum programs. And again, beginning in Orlando, this was really the problem they were after to solve here. And one of the things that we noticed in talking with customers, and in fact at ServiceNow and doing this ourselves, was that, when we've got teams working on something that's bigger than just a team, then, and this is going to sound a little redundant, but we're working on something that is bigger. And so we like to kind of look at epics, the parents of stories, as being sort of the central work item that we're planning with and that we're tracking in this kind of pattern. So those outcomes, or even whether it's a single outcome that these teams are together to deliver, or sort of an ongoing set of outcomes, we want to use epics to contain that, because we are just sort of, by definition, talking about bigger things. And then we look at the teams themselves, and there's a lot of different scaling methodologies out there. Many of them that require our teams to have what I'll call synchronized cadence, or basically the same sprint length, the same sprint start date, end date, that kind of thing. And that does work well in some situations because we have some natural points, to do things like putting our work together, or to have the ceremonies around. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we still have teams doing 2-week sprints, while we also have teams doing 3. Some of our teams are starting on Tuesdays, some are starting on Thursdays or Mondays, that kind of thing. And we're looking for a solution here that didn't require necessarily our teams to have synchronized cadences up front. And then the other thing that we're looking at is that, while teams may be working together on some things, they have their own work to do, but they may also have work that they're doing with other groups of teams, and they're in sync with them. So across this entire landscape, what we're really trying to do here is make realistic plans that bring together all of these teams sort of into a single kind of view that we can use to make sure that what we're doing is realistic and achievable. Good so far? Okay. So again, as to the work being done, we're primarily looking at epics here. And what we find is as we start to grow and to evolve into these kind of situations is like we might have the two epics as shown here on this screen. They've each got 4 stories, but we've got 3, 4, 5 different teams that are working on these stories. And even more importantly, there's a kind of a sequence to these stories. This story here has got to be done before this other story can do it by the same team in this case. But in this case down here, we've got a story that needs to be done by one team before another story can be done by yet another team. And even across the epics, we may have dependencies. This story may need to be done here by this team before this story in this other epic can be done by this team. So this is one of the toughest points really to make realistic plans across is when our teams do have these interdependencies. How do we create our plans and make sure those plans have things sequenced properly so that we're setting up our outcome to succeed here and not wind up with impediments and blockers down the road. And then again, the teams may have different sprint cadences, sprint lengths. That's okay. And as I kind of described earlier, I need to get my Zoom controls out of the way. Sorry. Let's look at this beta team here and the work that they're doing. So, they've got some of their own work, and that's here in this yellow part. But this team may also have work that they're doing with these other 2 teams, let's say on a certain epic or even on a certain group of epics. And that's okay because we find that's reality a lot of times. But then the beta team may also be doing work with a couple of other teams on yet a different epic. And again, that's okay here. The solution that we've got produced for this really takes all of this into account and lets us look at all of this. So regardless of how our teams are coming together to get work done, and kind of regardless of the state that our teams are in their own Agile journeys, regardless of how that work is kind of spread across these teams, we can create plans that take all that into consideration and come up with things that we're going to achieve realistic outputs with. Okay, so this is, like I said, where Scrum Programs comes in. That's kind of all I've got on this slide, where I can move over to the software at this point, unless we've got some questions or additional information needed from anybody. All right. Let me switch then real quick. Okay. Everybody see my next screen here?
Yep, I see it. You're good to go.
Okay, great. So there's a couple of kind of components to this that we set up before we can get to the planning board where we've got some meaning. And the first we call epic backlogs. And if you're familiar with Agile 2.0, you've seen personal backlogs or team backlogs. This really functions much the same. It's just, again, instead of dealing with stories, which by definition are things small enough for one team to do, we're dealing with epics here, which are things that are likely or in many cases bigger than one team can do, or certainly bigger than one team may be able to do in one sprint. So these are really just taking these epics and they're grouping together by a criteria that you define. So this kind of makes it wide open to be able to define these in much the same way that personal backlogs are. So in this case, I've got my employee experience backlog, and it's really just defined by all the epics that I've got out here that have certain descriptions. Now, realistic ones probably contain more criteria than this. There's probably different elements that we're building in here, but this is a very flexible construct where you can really use whatever that data is on those epics to determine what's a related collection of epics that multiple teams are going to be working on. And then the next thing we define are the programs themselves. And these programs really are just at heart, they're a collection of teams. So here I've got my HR and employee engagement program, and I've got these 4 teams that are contributing to this program. Again, one of these teams is going to probably have its own work, and one of these teams can be part of another program as well. That's okay. So it's not like a mutually exclusive construct here, but this particular program, I've got these 4 teams contributing to the work in this program. And I really just got a planned start and planned end date on this. The planned end date is optional if the teams want to just continuously be working together. And I can specify a default group of epics that I'm working on. So for example, if I wanted the HR employee experience here to be the default epic backlog for this, I could. Or I could just be bringing those in and out as time goes on. I don't necessarily have to have a default one. But in general, it's the teams that I'm defining with the program, and it's the epics that I'm defining as part of the backlog that really make up then what I plan. And so when we look at what we're planning, this is the Agile board in our Agile 2.0 application. And if you haven't seen this yet, there's a new toggle up here in the upper left, a toggle between team and program. Team is the existing team level functionality that you're probably accustomed to. You've got backlog, you've got planning, you've got sprint tracking. At the program level, we've got these new tabs here, backlog and planning. Now the backlog tab, what we're really doing here is we're taking that group of epics that matches the criteria for this, and we're doing things like elaborating on them. Maybe we're going in and refining the stories on these. We can even be stack ranking these much as you can with personal backlogs, so that the most important epics that I need to deliver are at the top. And then once I've got my backlog to the point where I'm really ready to work on it, or I'm in the process of working on it. I'm sorry, I have to back up my dates here. Because all my good demo data is back here in the past, sorry. Then I get a view like this. So across the top, I've just got a simple timeline. There's a day out here for each day in the month. And then what I'm mapping out here to the left, kind of in each row, are the teams that are involved in this program. So what you see here are these 4 teams that we defined for this HR and employee engagement program. Here they are, they each have their own row. And along the row for each team, what we see mapped out are the sprints for these teams. And you notice these sprints they're not in sync. They don't align. There's different sprint links here. There's different start and end dates. And again, that's okay, because what this is really providing this capability to do is to bring these teams together into a single view where I can plan across them. And then I mentioned dependencies. So that's one of the things that you see here in the arrows are the dependencies. So I need to be doing this story before this one, because this one depends on that story. So up here in the upper row, you see that this dependency arrow is green. But this one down here, I see a red one, which means that I've got something planned out of sequence. So the story that I really need to be doing first, I've got on my plan to do second. And so that jumps out at me as something I need to address. Then the other thing the board also shows us is the load of our plans based on the capacity of the teams. And that's in this little thermometer bar here that's underneath each one of the sprint names. So most of these are good. In other words, right here, the 12 points that I've got planned for this team for this sprint is only 80% of their group capacity for this sprint. So we're okay here. But down here with the HR delivery team and their sprint 18, I've got 105% of their group capacity planned. So this is not necessarily a realistic plan here for 2 big reasons that jump right out at me. First, I've got dependencies that are out of sequence. So I've got things kind of planned wrong. And I've really trying to overcommit this team. I'm overloading them in this sprint. So then with a simple drag and drop, I'm gonna try to fix both these problems in one shot. I'm gonna take this story that needs to be done second, and let's say I'm gonna move it. I'll keep it with the same team for now, and I'll put it in their sprint 20. So my load fixed, So now I brought the load down to something that's below 100% for this team. And my dependency sequencing is also fixed. So I've got things being planned in the right order. And then the plans that I'm setting here, then, this is basically the same stories, the same sprints, the same plans, the same dependencies. It's all the same data that the team uses. So when we go down to the team level, the teams will then see this as their upcoming sprint 20 plan. They can modify that. They may add more to it, that kind of thing as needed. But regardless of what then goes on at the team level, as the program manager, I can still come to this level and make sure that all the plans that the teams have made are good, that no one's overloaded, that my dependencies are in the right sequence. And I've got a single place to see all of this work that the teams are collaborating on in a single place. So that's Scrum programs. Like I said, first introduced in Orlando. We've continued to improve on this in Paris and got actually a few other little improvements coming to it in Quebec as well. So we're continuing to invest in this. Customers are getting a lot of value out of this, especially when they're at that point in the Agile journey where teams need to start working together, maybe without some kind of big rigorous framework, but we just want to start bringing them together in ways that they can create realistic plans across the teams. And for the things that they are collaborating on together, we can get things delivered reliably. Okay, that's what I wanted to share this morning. Any questions on this? All right, Charles, I'm not seeing any questions. I don't, nothing in chat either. So that's what we wanted to show. I think at this point, Charles, we could turn it over and see if there's questions from our attendees or any other topics that they want to focus in on.
You bet. All right, everyone, the floor is open to you guys. If you want to type in your questions or raise your hand and kind of ask a question that way, who wants to be the first one to ask questions around what you've seen as well as anything related to the ITBM Agile area, maybe how you're using it? Uh-oh, Diane, we can barely hear you.
Is this better?
Oh, there we go.
That's much better.
Okay,
Good
sorry.
morning.
Good morning. So if you were looking at velocity and things like that from a safe perspective, how would you do that? So we are looking at currently right now the ServiceNow development team. We're doing Agile-esque, right?
Okay.
Are
we all? Yes.
Agile-esque. I mean, we're not really doing epics yet, although it's actually a story to get the epic piece in because somehow it got taken off of our form. But what we kind of do is as somebody thinks of something or somebody requests something, we write a story. And then, when we're starting to do the stories, we realize, oh, this is actually really much bigger than a story, which technically should be an epic, right? And then what we kind of do is we just start building stories, right? So we're really not there yet, but I have a very a young team. But we are getting ready to start working with a consultant company to do SAFE. With other teams outside of the ServiceNow. So, when I'm looking at it, do you have any like suggestions or, possibility? Epic is confusing with people in healthcare. I agree with that. I say that and they're like, Epic? No, you don't do Epic. And I'm like, oh my God, it's not Epic, the software. I must say that. I must say that at least, once every time I'm talking to the application team.
Yes. different spelling even. It's just the same pronunciation, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I'm looking at things like, being able to really work through the velocity
Mhm.
and, you know, the reporting and just some of those things. If you could just show us some of that stuff.
Sure.
And I also am, you know, being very selfish here on this call because I have my Scrum Master. She joined the call too, so
Greetings.
I'm like, hey, let's see some stuff, and maybe other people can also, you know, benefit.
Absolutely. So two things. I mean, and primarily in our Agile product line, we have two different products. Sorry, I'm using the word product too much, but you know, we've got Agile 2.0, and what you just saw in Scrum programs is part of Agile 2.0. So it's really team and program level, but I'll call it Scrum. So the Scrum programs is kind of a Scrum at scale methodology, whereas our other product, our SAFe product, which starts with Essential SAFe, again, that's kind of team and program level, but at the program level in SAFe, we're much more prescriptive. And I say we because what I'm really talking about there is Scaled Agile Inc., the creators of SAFe. So there you have, you know, Agile release trains, and you have teams that are on these trains, and in general, a team is only on one train. And trains are producing features, which SAFe decided to change some terminology there. SAFe also has epics, but they're above features. So just to make everybody really confused, we've got that there. But in that case, the program level is really producing features. And all their teams on the train need to be on a synchronized cadence. So there's another difference there as well. So everybody has the same sprint length, the same sprint start and end dates. And all of those are contained within a kind of a quarterly cadence that SAFe calls a program increment. So it's kind of, they even called it PI/release in some really early versions of SAFe, but they went away from the term release because in general, the term release has evolved from meaning more of a planning cadence to now more of a delivery cadence. So the program increment in SAFe is very much a planning cadence, much like a sprint is. This is the work I'm going to get done. This is the work I'm planning to get done across all the teams in my art. I may be delivering, migrating code to production or other higher levels on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly, but it doesn't matter because the planning cadence and the deployment cadence are and can be separate. So given that background of sort of our two products and the environments they're intended for, we have Performance Analytics Content Pack, which is a really long way of saying dashboards, both for Agile 2.0 and for Essential SAFe. And you know, since you ask about SAFe, I'll just focus on this one, although they're very similar in terms of what they're providing. So with SAFe, we've got things like our feature dashboard. So again, as your arts are delivering features, you may want to hone in on particular features that you're interested in. The feature dashboards are for those. Or, you know, as a stakeholder of an epic, which, you know, contains features, is kind of a higher level construct in SAFe than it is in Agile. We also have SAFe dashboards there. Then you also have things like sprint dashboards, PI dashboards for the overall program increment that all of the teams in the art are on. But then you can also look at things like the art dashboard itself. So this is the team of teams in SAFe, as well as the team dashboard. And here you see things like your velocity charts. And one of the things that we're giving you in our velocity charts, and there it is, and I'm sorry, I can't stop these scrolls. In our help documentation, I'd like to, but they're there and they look cool, but they're hard to pause when you want to talk about something. So one of the things that our velocity charts help you cover it is not just like what the team is actually delivering sprint to sprint to sprint, but also comparing that to what the team stated capacity was sprint to sprint to sprint, as well as how much work they committed to every sprint. So you're really getting 3 series of data put together there in a single chart. And then we also give another chart where we're basically comparing those. So it's how different was what I completed versus what I said my capacity was, and how different was what I completed to the amount of work that I committed to. Because the smaller those differences are, then the more predictable our teams are becoming. So, you know, and you talked about having like consultants and coaches in to help with the SAFe adoption. That's good. And those are the kind of folks that use these kind of metrics also to look at how well the teams are performing. And we expect new teams or new teams, teams that are new to a train, we expect them to be learning more initially. And over time, we kind of want these things to start looking better as they get more mature in their practices and as they learn these practices. So in short, it's these performance analytics content packs for both of these products. Just read dashboards there. And you've got a great starting set of reports and charts and graphs that you can use for key Agile metrics. That was a really long-winded answer. Sorry. Did that help?
That did help. Thank you.
Wow, that was a big speech I just gave.
Scrolling, I was like, wow, that's awesome. I did have a quick question too from one of the customers. Is SAFE a paid add-on or not?
Yeah, SAFE is part of ITBM Pro. And actually parts of Agile 2.0 are also part of ITBM Pro, like the Scrum dashboards, the things at the program level for Agile 2.0, those are also part of ITBM Pro.
Gotcha. And then I had another question too that was just a random one. Are there any specific changes that are coming up in Paris that customers should be made aware of around SAFE?
Part of what we've done in Paris, and I may have this, let's see. I'm going to roll the dice here, folks. We're about to find out if some of these are in here or not. Oh, yes, they are. Yay. Okay. So yeah, some of the things, especially on PI planning and SAFE, for example, we've added this unplanned lane here to the planning board. That's also getting at it to Scrum programs, the same thing. So one of the things you've got as you're planning these is I've got my feature flyout. I got to make sure I'm using the right terms here for SAFE. So any stories unplanned yet in features basically appear in this flyout, and from here I can drag and drop them into a particular team, a particular sprint, that kind of thing. But for the stories that are still in this team's backlogs within this ARD and within this PI, those really needed a place to appear. So they're now in this backlog. I believe it's ultimately called the backlog lane here. They appear here. And then from here, I can either move them to another team and another sprint, or a sprint within this team, or I can actually even move them back and to the entirely unplanned backlog as well. So that's one of the main, I think, pieces of functionality that we added here. We've also added some convenience features like being able to drill into teams from here, being able to drill into sprint information from here. So just trying to let folks do more on the board without leaving the board to go do some of the kind of maintenance things that go along with this, like if this team in sprint 3 was going to have a lower capacity because of vacations or training or that kind of thing. And if I was logged into the right kind of user to be able to change that, I could. So those are just some of the enhancements for SAFE coming in Paris.
Great. Another question, the content pack for Agile 2.0, when is it available in Orlando?
It's already out and available in Orlando. In fact, what you're looking at right now is the Orlando version of the documentation for both of those.
Great. Other questions from the field? I think I've addressed the majority of them inside of the chat window. I'm going to scroll up just to make sure. Yes, I have.
I'm curious if, and this is Colin from ServiceNow, if there are no questions at the moment. So I've heard from one customer that's implementing SAFE. Is Scaled Agile Framework something that many of you have heard of or are planning to implement or have already implemented?
No, silence.
Sorry, so you're asking us if we're implementing it or we're going to implement it in ServiceNow, you mean?
Yeah, if you, at your organizations, you're implementing Scaled Agile, We support multiple configurations, and I'm curious what, basically for companies that are looking to implement, what configuration of SAFe are you planning to, was going to be my follow-on question.
Okay, so at Wellstar, we are planning on Essential SAFe.
And then I got another one from another customer. They're just rolling on Agile as a whole. Not sure yet exactly what that will mean for the configuration.
And keep in mind, so SAFe is, I'd say, a highly prescriptive way of doing Agile at scale. It's not the only way of doing Agile at scale. It's probably the most popular of them, but that's why we support both having a very SAFe specific, following the SAFe board follows how SAFe says to do it. Whereas Scrum Programs is meant to be where you're scaling Agile, but you're not specifically following SAFe. You're doing it some other way. There are lots of them, as I said. There's actually Scrum at Scale. There's Nexus. I think Disciplined Agile is all, but I haven't heard anyone ask about that from in a while. So it's just more of trying to understand, as you're implementing these at scale, if customers are truly using SAFe, or if they are deciding on their own Agile at scale methodologies.
I'm assuming then that's a big no right now, that some customers. I guess the other question around SAFe, are you guys looking to possibly leverage this? Do you see kind of the benefits of leveraging this type of methodology within your infrastructure and your workflow? Or is that kind of unclear? That's another question too.
And I'll also say, so both Tom and I come from a long history in the Agile world. We've been practitioners, we've been coaches. So if you have more general questions that you'd like to ask us, we're open to that as well.
I know I'd like to ask a question. This is Diane, but I it's one of those, I don't know what I don't know.
That's all right. There's plenty of those. Go ahead.
Well, I'll give you an example of, since we actually have a little bit of time, I'll give you an example of the kind of teams that we are at Wellstar. So historically, we have been just a configuration shop, right? We have, there's no development in Epic. You configure it. Okay. There's limited development in ServiceNow. I mean, you can go kind of crazy, but it's designed to be configured, right? Especially if you're staying in the box.
Yeah.
And pretty much all of the other healthcare things that we do, we configure them for whoever needs it, and we move on. We don't develop software.
Right.
But as we are trying to move to the next level and trying to do automation, and like, for instance, I just bought Blue Prism in order to do some RPA.
Okay.
And as we are moving in that, we started realizing that, this old-fashioned way of let me figure out all of the requirements immediately and let me go ahead and set it up, and that wasn't exactly what you wanted, was it? Well, we just spent 4 weeks building that report exactly how we thought that
Right.
you said. There's a great old-fashioned slide. It was like a comic strip about marketing, and it was like what the customer heard, what the salesperson heard, what the marketing person heard, and at the end, all they really wanted was a tire swing.
Yeah, we've all seen. I love that one.
Yeah, it's a great one, and that happens so many times. So, we've decided that we need to move more into Agile. Now, I personally actually wanted to do something very simplistic, like, kind of just like Scrum, make
Yeah.
2 weeks, just talk about it, have demos, and just do this little quick iteration. But it was kind of determined that they wanted to do this essential safe, and I think it's because of the arts, right? Because most of our teams are not siloed in and of themselves, and they need to talk to the doctors and the nurses, and
Right.
yeah, that's it. I love it. That's my favorite. I used to have that up on the board forever.
Yeah, me too.
But at the end of the day, I think that the plan is well, because of all the different stakeholders, we would go with safe.
Okay.
So now I'm trying to look at it as, how do I make that get implemented in a environment? Healthcare is so not really like that. So how do I, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand it, and especially how I'm going to do it in ServiceNow, because, ideally I don't want to, I am opposed to Jira. All you Jira lovers, I'm really sorry. I've spent years and years working in Jira, and I was just like, it's perfect for a development shop, but it's not perfect for what we do. And these consultants are like, well, you should just buy Jira. And I'm like, why do I need to buy Jira? I have ServiceNow. Let me just figure out how to do it in ServiceNow, and let's move on. So, so I'm just, like, do you have any thoughts about, like, how would you attack this in ServiceNow? What would you suggest to start with, so that, because I cannot do the big elephant all at once. It'll be overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, a couple of things. SAFE has the implementation roadmap. I don't know if you've looked in that, but SAFE probably.
Yeah, they're starting to tell us. They're starting to train us all on this.
Okay. So, and this, really because our SAFE product was designed to align with the SAFE methodology, what you'll find is that as you're going along the implementation roadmap here, that as you do things like identify your, value streams and arts, as you identify those arts, you can just go set them up in ServiceNow. It's pretty straightforward. And there's somewhere in here about, prepare for our line. Somewhere in here is about like identifying what, your epics and features are that you're going to be running through your first PI. Same thing, go into our SAFE products and create those as well, just like you create stories. One of the things that ServiceNow is happy to do, and it's very funny because looking back at this picture, there's the business consultant frame here, in the comic. We're very happy to work with whoever your SAFE consultant is. And we're trying to get more and more of these kind of consulting groups familiar with ServiceNow, familiar with our ServiceNow, both Agile at Scale and SAFE product, because we are relatively, than some of the other players in this space, we're newer to the industry. So, we're helping them get educated about our offerings too as well. But there's also, I would say, always be cognizant of the big armchair kind of solution, and in terms of maybe going too big, too fast, that kind of thing, because we all want to get to this, even if all we need is the tire swing at the moment. So it's really just sort of aligning, at the point that you need to start instrumenting something in the product, whether that's an art, whether that's a feature, whether that's a PI. At that point, just go instrument them in the ServiceNow product. And what you'll find is really nice alignment between most of the SAFE terminology and the terminology that we have in the product. So, when you're looking at this, these are our teams, this is our art, this is our PI, these are our sprints, these are our stories. They all roll up to features, so it's kind of, I just want to say it's sort of self-explanatory or intuitive in terms of that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And I'll say our our main point for making a different experience was explicitly because as you are implementing, and by the way, when you go in and you look, you'll see Portfolio Safe or Essential Safe. Pick the right one. So if you're implementing Essential Safe, turn that one on in ServiceNow. Don't turn on Portfolio because it just shows you things that may not matter to you. But everything was designed explicitly to support how Safe does it. So for instance, Tom, on the board, if you click on board, it's the Kanban board you see. Those are the states that Safe talks about. So you don't have to go in and do an additional implementation if you're taking how Safe tells you to do it. We explicitly support that. Now, if you decide later on you want to change some of these, you certainly can, but we give you how Safe works. On the backlog, if you want to click on the backlog one, we're explicitly showing you things on this. Yeah, there we go. So we've got, so we have some things. We are following how Safe says to do it. So you have the weighted shortest job first score on the features. We're only showing you things that are relevant to how Safe says to do it. So if you do have teams that are still just doing Scrum, aren't a part of Safe, they'll be in the Agile board. They won't be seeing all this Safe related stuff. But if you're in Safe, we've put together a user experience that is designed to be, how does Safe do it? That way you're not having to think, is the tool I'm using doing it the way Safe says to do it? To help with that, as you're getting trained on how Safe says to do things, we're reinforcing it. We're being very explicit in how we show things to you.
There was a quick question too that came into the chat. So how does Safe interact with the regular Agile components? It looks like you have to create epics in both places.
Well, part of that is because an epic in Safe is not the same thing as an epic in Scrum. So this is another example of where it's the same word, but it means different things. In Safe, the level above story is feature. In Scrum, the level above is epic. And in Scrum, a lot of times above epic is either more epics or themes, whereas above a feature inside of Safe is an epic. An epic is the highest thing in Safe. There's a configuration of Safe that has 4 levels. Epic is still on top. It's just there's a capability in between feature and epic instead. It's just that's how Safe is done. So we did that intentionally because what you track is different. What they are is different. So we're helping those that are in Safe do things the way Safe says to do it. And if you're in Agile 2.0, then we're basically following what Scrum dictates and the terms that Scrum uses. We actually do have some things on our roadmap to help them to interoperate better. But there are ways that if you do need to work through the two, we can help you. But that's not the norm. Within Safe, they recommend that your release train is, it contains everybody that's on the train. You don't have people that are kind of partially on the train and partially off, because that makes it a lot harder to plan in Safe.
And that's really the key question that we actually wind up asking you as you're looking at, which product should a team use? And Safe, like as Colin was saying, is very binary about this. A team is either on a train or they're not, period. Now, real life, of course, can be a little less black and white than that. But in general, if your team is on an ART and they've either launched a PI or are preparing to launch a PI, that team should be using the Safe application. Otherwise, a team should be using Agile 2.0.
And then just another random question. Is any of this capability available via mobile? You could access this via like a tablet or phone, any type of functionality that's available that way, or is it strictly just through the regular platform?
Yeah, we've got a mobile app for Agile, and right now primarily it's letting you do sprint tracking. So it's kind of the things that are going on at the sprint, past the point where the sprint has actually started. And whether that's an individual team member or a scrum master or a product owner, but things that are going on during the course of the sprint is the primary where we started with the mobile application.
And I can say that I don't think that we officially say anything one way or the other about the Agile board and tablets, but I'm someone who works almost exclusively on my iPad, and I'll say it works for me. If you are, I will say, if you are finding more and more usage around doing things on a mobile device, on a tablet, especially big room planning, I don't see working on a phone. And the Scrum program, I don't see that working on a phone. It's just, there's too much information we need to see. But if you are finding that out more, send that feedback to us so we can decide if it's important enough for us to have official support for it, because it's just not something that comes up enough from customers to warrant having explicit support. But again, I work almost exclusively from my iPad, and I don't have any problems with it.
Perfect. Great. So we have about probably time for maybe one or two more questions. Any other questions from the customers on the line? I think I answered all the ones that were in the chat window, so, or asked the ones that were in the chat window.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
Hey, Charles.
Go for it.
It's Chris Waters at UNCG. I'm the ServiceNow product owner here. And you and I, Charles, had spoken before about, kind of questions I had about how Agile and the various Agile modules can supply information back into PPM. And I just wanted to kind of float that question for the room here. Are there any advantages for, either Agile 2.0 or for Safe Style Agile with either existing, visibility from kind of a resource management or PPM kind of viewpoint, or is there one that's planned? Anything that you can share?
So we do have some work. This is Colin. We do have some work going on to help with the resource side of things that I don't know if it's going to be in Quebec or if it's going to be released through the store on the Quebec platform, which just means that it comes out sometime after Quebec, but before the San Diego release. So that is something that we are working through. Just it can be complicated, and we're trying to simplify that because Agile works mainly in teams, whereas resource management works quite a bit on people. And how to balance that is something that we're trying to remove the complexity from how you have to deal with it. So I'll say it's ongoing work that we have.
And that sort of as to the first part of the question, yes, you can do things like I can make certain project phases Agile. And in that case, instead of looking at project tasks, we're looking at stories, or we're looking at epics, and that's the Agile definition of epic in that case. And then the information about the progress of those can be basically brought back to and aggregated to the project phase and the project level itself. So it kind of does give you that framework where, maybe it's sort of a water scrum fall kind of methodology where we're still going through, instantiation, governance, and funding at the project level, but then we're executing in Agile.
The way that I tend to, the reason that the questions are coming up is, we have things that are really traditional project kind of focus, and they're about kind of expansion of service or creation of new service, changing scope of service. But then we have operational lines, right, that we need to maintain. Mm-hmm. And there's. It's like looking, at the world through two totally different perspectives. If you're an operational manager and you want to run Scrum versus if you want to run projects and how things seem to work in the platform from a project perspective. So it's great to have as much insight as I can get from ServiceNow and from those of you that, kind of are in the know. I appreciate the answer. Thanks.
Yeah, any customers that are doing that have some firsthand experience they could share?
And it's okay if you struggle through it, if we're still kind of working through the patterns. But that's what the dialogue's all about. I see Tracy. Did you have a question as well?
Oh no, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, we have about one more minute time for just one final question. Any other final questions from the field? I've checked the chat window. Looks like all the questions have been answered. Anyone left on the call who want to ask the question of Chris and Tom about Agile before we head out? Great. Well, thank you all so much for attending this office hour. I really appreciate the interaction and definitely the questions. If there are other questions that pop up, feel free to reach out to me, Charles Rayburn. I'm actually on the invite. Just respond back to that. I will send over a copy of the deck that was showed, as well as a copy of the recording, as well as a link to the survey. Let us know how we did and if there's other topics you'd like to hear about during these office hours. Thank you so much, Tom and Chris, for attending this. Or, I'm sorry, Colin, for presenting during this conversation with the customers. And we appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.